So, you guys want to write down your score on the front page. Well, not necessarily on the front page. Just turn over one page, and on the top of the reading section, tell me what you got on reading, tell me what you got on writing, and what you got on math. Okay. So reading, like for example, this. I'm not talking about like the on the scale of 40 thing. I'm talking about like these kinds of scores. Okay. So this is what I want to see.
Wait, but it's like the reading and writing is like, oh, okay.
Did you think about turning the page? Guys can't find the score?
No, it's only like in total for like.
I'll just take a look at your thing. Okay. And also, did you guys bring notebooks? No? You don't have a notebook?
No.
What?
I forgot. Bringing it with me.
Just a second. 저 A4 용지 좀 가져갈게요. Okay, this is only temporary, meaning you should write it down on your notebook once you get home. Okay, so do you actually mind sitting right here?
Here?
Yeah, it's it feels a little bit. The room feels a little bit unbalanced because we don't have people here. Okay, so, well, I'm gonna talk about some things not to do. Things not to do. Okay. Well, I'm not talking about in class. I'm talking about now that you're actually trying to study for the test. Like, okay, like, yeah, you've been studying for the test, but it wasn't this intensive. You didn't. You weren't just drilling tests hardcore. Okay. And by the way, you guys should fold this in half. That's a better way to use it. So fold it in half. And no, not like that. Like this. So you can write in 2 columns. Okay? Okay, so these are things that you absolutely should not do when you're preparing for the SAT. Okay? So like, worst thing that you can do when you get your report is grade your test right away. Okay. Notice I'm saying, okay, so these are stuff not to do, okay? I'm not saying do this, I'm saying don't do this. Don't grade your test right after you get your score thing. Like what I'm saying is don't open your text booklet and just start grading it, saying, okay, I got number 4 wrong, and then I chose A, but actually it's C. Do not do this, okay? This is gonna ruin everything. This is the worst thing that you can do, okay? So don't grade your test right away, and think you can easily get an 800 on math. Okay? It might happen from time to time, but focus on the fact that you're getting stuff wrong. Okay? So, I mean, even if you got an 800, if you got one wrong, focus on what you're getting wrong. Don't let that get into your head. Okay? Even if you get an 800 on one test, like if you chances are you got lucky. So unless I see you guys getting an 800 for at least 3 consecutive tests, I'm not saying like on 3 separate occasions, I'm talking about 3 consecutive tests. You know what I mean? So if you get a 800 on 3 consecutive tests, then I'll be fine with it, okay? Then you guys are solid. But if you can't do it, like on one test you get an 800, on another one you get 780, and then 800, no. You can't get an 800. Chances are you're going to get this. There is a possibility of you getting this on the actual one. So, I mean, I think someone who's watching the video or some other people got an 800 today, but don't let that get into your head. Okay. So, I mean, we're also. I mean, we're going to talk a little bit about math. Well, I'm not going to be talking about math. There's going to be another teacher coming in. Did you guys take his class? No, you didn't, right? Okay, so, but anyway, he's going to be talking about math for like 20 or 30 minutes. But, well, not today though. But be modest when it comes to math, because that's really what's going to count on test day. Because on test day, what's even more important than reading is the writing and math. You really need to get, you need to consistently get -2 or better on writing. -2 or better. So what are these 2 questions that you can potentially get wrong? The only questions that you're allowed to get wrong on writing is conventional expression. So expression or diction. Okay? So those questions, if you get it wrong, I'm not gonna say anything. Okay? It's all good. Okay? But other than that, especially when it comes to grammar questions, like I'm talking about logical comparisons, right? Or subject-verb agreement, sentence structure, punctuation, pronouns. Those you should never get wrong, okay? Like it should be 100% at this point. That's the focus of this class. It's not like we're just practicing now and saying like, oh, you know, fine, let's just get the methodology down. Yeah, we do need to get the methodology down, but you also need to consistently get them right. If you drill 50 questions, you should get 50 of them right, okay? So it should be very consistent. If you don't, so for example, on today's test, I don't recall anybody getting this, okay? So I don't recall anybody getting -2 or better on writing. So if you take a look at what kind of questions you got wrong, you don't have to do that now, but if you take a look at that, keep track of all the questions that you're getting wrong, first of all, Okay, so like on the first page of your notebook. Okay, well, let's talk about things to do. Keep track of all questions you're getting wrong. Okay, so this pertains to writing. Okay, so I'm talking about writing. So on the very first page of your notebook, I want to see something like this. Okay, so some of you probably already did this, but you should have like this mini table, and it should be like, okay, so add delete. I got one wrong here, and subject-verb agreement. I got 3 wrong, that kind of thing. Logical comparison. I got 2 wrong. So that you should keep track. Okay, you should keep track of what tests you're getting. What kind of questions you're getting wrong, and you should do that for every test. So this is test 1, right? And on test 2, what are you getting wrong? Okay, on test 3, what happened here? Okay, so I want you guys to keep track of this. So it's not optional anymore. You definitely need to do this. Okay. So since we don't have many people in our offline class, I'm gonna check this. Okay. So you guys need to do this, right? Absolutely. Like, I can't emphasize this enough. Okay. So, well, okay. Let's talk about some other things. You need to do that, and what else do you need to do? Okay, well, this is what you're going to do. You're going to outline for reading. Okay, so this is what you need to do for writing in terms of getting your score up. But for reading, this is the most important thing. Outline every reading passage. Okay, so what do I mean by outline? Well, this is gonna be the stuff that I do on the board. So you guys might remember me doing this in class, right? So when I'm talking about a particular passage, when I'm talking about like a science passage, for example, I say, okay, so this is the question, this is the direction sentence, right? This is the process, this is the result, or you know, when it comes to like a history passage, you can do it by paragraph. You can say, okay, so in the first paragraph, I've had idea number 1 and idea number 2. This is the first paragraph. And in the second paragraph, I only had this one idea. And then in the third paragraph, I had these 3 ideas. So you should outline every single passage. And we're going to be focusing on this. Okay? Why are we doing this? Well, first of all, okay, so the time issues aside, what you really need to practice right now is you need to practice imprinting information into your brain. Okay, like this is actually it's going to be dramatically improved once you practice for this. What do I mean by that? So when you read a passage, you don't remember that many things. It's usually, like I've always told you guys, 4 or 5 things that you're going to remember from the passage. And you want to select it, but the thing is, some people, they forget it pretty fast. Okay, so and chances are you're likely going to, if you're going back and forth, like you took the test today, you took it on Saturday, so I'm not sure if you remember it so well, but if you find yourself going back and forth in the passage, you're not imprinting the information in your brain, and you need to practice that muscle. And how you do that is it's not going over a whole bunch of passages. It's not about going over a lot of passages. It's about going through every passage thoroughly, okay? And really knowing that passage and knowing the structure inside out. And once you know the structure inside out, when you get a similar passage to that, you refer back to the passages that you read in the past. Oh, this is like that bird flying in V formation passage that I've read before. Once you start thinking in those terms, that's when the test is going to get easy. So when you see a passage from now on, okay, what's the most ideal thing that can happen is you can think about a similar passage that you read in the past. Not in terms of the subject matter, but in terms of the structure, right? Like I'm saying, okay, is this passage like a huge before and after? Like, let's say I'm reading like a history passage. So it's talking about some kind of change, okay? It's talking about some kind of change, and I'm asking and then it's talking about what's the cause that brought about this change, okay? Well, I mean, there's a lot of passages like this. Like, for example, remember that passage where it talks about people who immigrated to America. You guys remember that? They used to be useless plants. You guys remember this passage? Useless plants, but they became citizens. Do you remember that passage? Yeah. So that passage was that. It was about, useless plants. And I mean, this itself was an analogy, right? They were ranked as the poor. This is what they meant. And now, after they came to the United States, they flourished, right? What does it mean flourished? It meant that they became citizens, right? So we have this analogy that's hinting at this before and after. And then what was the cause of that? It was talking about because of the laws and because of their industry, right? Laws and industry is what made this change happen. You guys remember that? So if you see a passage like that, okay, so remember that was a dual passage, and then in the first passage, there was that Benjamin Franklin passage. What was that Benjamin Franklin passage about? It was talking about mistaken ideas versus what? Mistaken ideas versus truer notions, right? About what? About America. You guys remember that? So that passage was sort of like this. You remember that? Mistaken ideas and truer ideas, right? So we go like this, and then we had the new ideas. And then based on this, he made a certain conclusion. He said, so if you have a means of living, don't go to America. And what else did he say? He said, if you have nothing to recommend but your birth, don't go, right? So that was this passage. He makes this really big comparison on a very macro scale, and then he makes two conclusions based on that comparison, right? There's going to be passages like these, okay? So if you see any passage, like this is the ideal thing that can happen. Like I said, if you see a certain passage talking about it before and after, you should think, okay, this could potentially be like that useless plant passage, okay? If you see a comparison passage, if you see a comparison on a macro scale, you want to tell yourself, okay, this is like the Benjamin Franklin passage. Now I want to look for these two ideas, and then he's potentially going to make a conclusion based on that comparison. Okay, so you should have that sense of expectation. It's not necessarily about understanding every single passage. It's finding a pattern. If you don't find any recurring patterns, you're not doing anything. You're just you're just mindlessly drilling the tests. That's not going to help you. So every passage that we do from now on, at least, okay? So I mean, I'm going to ask you guys to also annotate in your own terms and outline the passages that we've read before. But I want you guys to start seeing repetition points, right? In terms of structure, you should think to yourself, I've seen this, okay? Good? So that's the aim of this class, okay? So that's why we're doing this. You're outlining every single reading passage, okay? Things not to do, well, Another thing not to do is look at the answer choice. Look at the answer sheet before reviewing. Okay? I talked about this so many times, but hypothetically speaking, what happens if you look at the answer sheet before you review the test? Well, at this point, okay, so you guys are all getting like somewhere in the mid 1400s to like early 1500s. That's like your score range right now, okay? Everybody in this class is in that score range. Once you're in that score range, it's usually a 50-50 game, right? So if you're confused with the question, it's a 50-50 game, right? What you should be able to identify is just the fact that you got to that point, being like you're in a coin flip situation. You're debating between A and D. What does this mean? It means you got that question wrong, okay? It doesn't mean you almost got it right, okay? It means you got that question wrong, okay? So that's how you should approach. Because, if you so let's say you chose A, and then later on, you look at the answer sheet and then it says D. You're just going to think to yourself, okay, I could have gotten that right. But that's not true at all, okay? Because I want you guys to try this. When you're reviewing the test, the most ideal thing that you can do is have someone else take a look at your score, okay? So have someone else take a look at your score. What does that mean? I want them to tell you, they should be able to tell you how many questions you got wrong. Okay? All right, so let's say, for example, so you guys got I don't know, say you got, let's say, for example, you got 15 wrong on this test, okay? So 15 wrong. You guys should be able to find which questions that you got wrong just based on that knowledge alone. You know what I mean? I don't want anybody telling you, hey, you got question number 1 wrong, and you got 10, 12, 14, 17. These are the question numbers that you got wrong. If someone tells you that, you automatically know what the answer is. You trick yourself into thinking that you're reviewing the test. But actually try this. If someone comes along and tells you you got 15 wrong on the reading section, can you even identify the ones that you got wrong? Okay? I want you to honestly try that. Because you can't find it. Okay? You guys know what I mean, right? Just based on that knowledge alone, just knowing how many questions you got wrong, you should be able to, that's how you should be reviewing the test. You should be able to identify which ones you got wrong. And better yet, okay, once you get past this point, after you review the test, you want to look at it again, and without knowing how many you got wrong, you want to be able to tell how many and which questions that you got wrong. That's the end game, right? That's how you get 15-50. That's how you should review a test. If you do otherwise, that's you're just tricking yourself. It's not necessarily reviewing, okay? And what else? Focus on solving questions and reading passages the right way. As opposed to what? So this is a key difference. So number 4 here and number 4 here is a very key difference, okay? So this is what you should not do. You should not focus on reading passages and solving questions. You should focus on solving questions and reading passages the right way. This is what counts, okay? That's why we're gonna go over almost every single question, and we're gonna go over every single passage, okay? Because if you did not do it the right way, there is a potential for you to get that question wrong in the future. Like if a similar passage shows up or a similar question shows up, okay? So you should focus on doing it the right way. It's all about methodology, okay? It's not necessarily about getting the right answer choice. It's not about understanding that sentence. It's about doing it the right way, okay? Methodology is everything. So, I mean, I don't know if you guys still remember all the things that we talked about, but we're gonna be going over those methodologies, okay? So if you don't remember something, you guys should actively ask me, okay? So let's say, for example, you don't remember how to do like a sentence combination question, okay? You forgot. You don't know the step-by-step process for doing a sentence combination question. Then you should ask me, okay? So, I mean, actually think about it. Like, how do you do a sentence combination question? Okay, I'm not gonna ask you guys, but think about it. How are you gonna do it? As opposed to what? As opposed to just unconsciously streaming through it, just you know, flow. Just I don't know. Like you just start reading the questions and you just look at them without any kind of proper basis. That's what you don't want to be doing. Okay. So this is very important. Okay. So you guys should be in the right mindset. Okay. Do not be so cocky. Your score will not increase. If you only focus on questions that you get wrong, it's not addressing the whole problem, because chances, especially if you're getting more than 6 or 7 wrong, okay? On any given test, I'm saying, like not on a consistent basis, like just any test you get more than like 6 wrong, it means there's a fundamental problem, okay? The fundamental problem being a lack of methodology. Okay, so that's what we should be focusing on. All right. Okay, so any questions so far before we go into the test? No questions? I knew it. I knew. Okay, so before we go into the literature passage, let's think about how we should approach a literature passage. Do you guys remember this? How do you approach a literature passage? What are the things that you should be looking for? Matthew?
We should be looking for plot and characterization.
Yes. Did you do that?
Yeah.
Oh, you did? Are you sure?
Yeah,
Did you?
P and C.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
Oh, that's very good. Nice. Very good. Very good. So that's basically it. In terms of literature, those are the main things that we're going to be looking at. Okay? So characterization is usually more important. Plot is just there to provide like an overall structure of the passage. That's usually the frame in which the characterization is placed in. Okay? So let's take a look at this passage. Okay? So I do have some background information a little bit here. So what does it say? After a long journey from her home in England, 8-year-old Jay is meeting her mother's family in Nigeria for the first time. Okay, I want to tell you guys this. This is an extremely common format. What kind of format? What kind of story is this? Well, it's about like meeting your roots. Okay, So this happened a lot of times actually. So and you should write that on that piece of paper. Never ever take notes on your test booklet, because I know for a fact you're not going to review that test ever again once you leave this room. I know that. Or will you? Do you guys do that? Matthew, did you review your test after class before? You did? Oh, you did. Oh, okay, fine. Did you review your tests? Oh, you did. Okay, fine. But still, I want you guys to have like a notebook, right? A separate notebook that you can use as a kind of cheat sheet, okay? So you guys should always be reading over that. So meeting and confronting your roots. What is this usually? Okay, so the protagonist is gonna have like any number of experience in a like first world country, like usually the United States, and then they go back to their home country, like in this case, they go back to Nigeria. Or like a common thing is they go and just meet their grandparents, okay? Well, grandparents in the United States, but the grandparents, they're like first generation immigrants or something like that. So what is this passage? What do they talk about in these cases? They talk about the generational differences, generational. So these are always present, okay? I mean, I'm not saying all of them, but it's usually going to be about these things, okay? When it's a story like this, okay? So generational difference. Well, generational difference. It could. I mean, it's usually a combination of these two things. There is a generational difference, but at the same time, there is also a cultural difference. Why? Because I mean, okay, think about it. Like you and your parents are kind of different also, right? It could be both it could either be generational, but it could also it's kind of cultural, right? You guys speak English, your parents probably not, or do they? I mean, even if they do, they're not so fluent, right? As you are, or are they?
Oh.
They are?
What do you mean?
Do they speak English, your parents?
No.
Were they educated abroad?
No.
Or, okay, so there's that difference. You know that too, right? So, but a lot of people who take the SAT, surprisingly, they're not familiar with that. But you are, right? You know what they're talking about. If you meet your grandparents, you feel that difference, right? You feel that cultural difference. They have that expectation of, you know, oh, you're Korean, so you need to behave like this and this, right? But I mean, you kind of have that in you, but you don't buy into that 100% as they do, right? So it's like a version of that, usually in these kinds of stories, okay? And also, there's always going to be a contrast, okay? There's always going to be two contrasting ideas. It's going to be, well, not always, but you know, it's usually about that contrast. It's like the new way of things, or like the United States way of things versus the Nigeria way of things, right? There is that difference, and you feel that foreignness that the protagonist feels, right? Or but at the same time, they don't look down on that culture. Like the SAT, it's a really politically correct test. They wouldn't really, present that culture in a derogatory manner or anything. it's always going to end up being like appreciation for that culture. Okay, so those are the common things that happen in these kinds of passages. Happened like, I think like 5 or more times. Okay, ever since like the first test first came out. There's a lot of passages like these. Okay, so let's take a look. So it's meeting her mother's family in Nigeria for the first time. Okay, so they actually went to Nigeria, right? They went to Nigeria. She's not, obviously the protagonist is not going to be used to this. Okay, so with that in mind, let's take a look at the passage. It says, there they all stood. I don't know who they are. Okay, but they're all standing there. An uncertain circle. Uncertain circle. And then her grandfather came forward, greeted her mother, shook hands with her father. Okay, I guess this is their initial meeting, right? So this is their initial meeting. This is what happens. This is the first plot, right? So I got, okay, even if I don't do like an entire outline just because I want to save a little bit of time, you guys should be writing down all the plot points and the characterizations, okay? So this is the first plot, right? Greeted, right? Grandfather came forward and then greeted her mother, shook hands with her father, right? Okay, so they obviously includes their her Jay's grandparents, their parents, and also Jay, I guess, right? So this is their initial meeting, and then it says, although he seemed mellower and smaller than the picture that her mother had painted for over the years, Jess had a sudden and irrational fear that he might start shouting at her. Okay, so this is another thing that I haven't told you guys. In literature, the most common narrator is gonna be first person point of view, first person limited omniscient. Well, I forgot the technical term of it, but it's always going to be from a single person's perspective, okay? Have you guys read Harry Potter? You guys read Harry Potter? So do you know what's going on inside everyone's head in Harry Potter? Whose head are you in? Harry. But you're in Harry's head like the entire time. You only know what Harry's thinking, right? But is the narrator in the story? No. So that's the most common format. Okay? You're not inside everyone's head. It's always in the protagonist's head. Okay? This is like 90% or more of the time. Okay? So yeah, of course there's some first person narratives like Jane Eyre. That's whole from Jane's perspective, right? There's that, but usually most of the time you're in one of the characters' heads, and you know all but you're aware of all the action that's going on. Okay, so whose perspective is this? It's Jay's perspective, right? So this is how Jay views her grandfather, right? So how did she look at her? She saw him and she thought he was mellower and smaller than the picture that her mother had painted for her over the years. Okay, so obviously there was a picture that her mother painted of him, right? But I guess in that picture, he was a little bit more intimidating, but not really so right now, right? Jess had a sudden and irrational fear that he might start shouting at her. So this is also what she felt towards her grandfather, right? So it's a little bit of an irrational fear that she feels. So is she totally comfortable meeting this person? No. So that's what this passage is going to be about, right? So this passage is about Jay interacting with her grandparents or whatever other families on her trip to Nigeria, and that's what this means. The uncertain circle is they're not really sure of each other, right? I mean, they don't know what to expect of each other, right? They're not so familiar with another. That's what this paragraph is trying to show. That's the main thing. Okay. Let's go to the next part. It says, he looked at her, put his hands on his hips in mock consternation, and her cousins and her mother laughed. Oh, okay. So, you know, like he just kind of put his hands on his hips, and like he just looked kind of a little bit angry, like just as a joke or something. And then we can see that he's not being serious looking at these words, right? And her mother laughed. Her father, standing slightly outside the circle, smiled encouragingly at her. Okay, so this is what's happening, right? So her grandfather is making a move, right? He's kind of gesturing, like it's kind of a friendly gesture, I guess. They're not really used to it. He's trying to a little bit like break the ice, right? And he's acting friendly and that kind of thing. Her grandfather held out a hand. Okay, so it's an extension of that. Her grandfather reaching out to the protagonist. His hands were big and square. Okay, so this is a grandfather's characterization also. Spade-like, the palms deeply etched and calloused. Okay, so he's I don't know, like a pretty tough guy, I guess. She took a step towards him, smiling a wobbly, nervous smile that she could not feel on her face. Okay, so here. So the only person that we know, the only person whose thoughts we know is the protagonist, right? The protagonist is nervous, right? How does the grandfather feel? I don't know, right? We only see his gestures. That's the limited narrator, right? Okay, she did not know what was expected of her. Okay, so she like, okay, so what's Jay's characterization so far? It's uncertainty, right? And she's also nervous. So these are the primary things that we get out of him, and get out of Jay. And the grandfather, what we get out of him is he's I don't know. I would say, his hands big and square, spade like, the palms, blah 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 blah. It just seemed like he's kind of like this overbearing character. I mean, just to that little girl, I guess. To that little girl, it seems like he's a little bit intimidating. I mean, not more so than the picture that her mom used to paint of him, but a little bit of that, okay? Well, anyway, when suddenly on an outward gust of air, he half said, half announced the name. Wuraula, okay, Wuraula. So this is what he said all of a sudden. Who, she froze, not knowing what to say or do. Okay, so this is the important plot, I guess. Okay, so plot-wise, what's happening? They were standing in a circle. Her grandfather came up to her, and he was like, Wuraula, right? Called her. That's the only thing that happened so far. Okay, of course she knew that Wuraula was her Yoruba name. Okay, so Yoruba name meaning this is like her name in that culture, right? I guess they're given like a different name instead of Matthew. You don't have a Korean name, right? What's your Korean name? Huh? Yeah, so it's kind of like that, right? So they're just calling this person in the Nigerian name, in their Nigerian name. The name that her grandfather had asked in a letter for her to be called when her mother had held her Nigerian naming ceremony. Okay, so we can infer that, right? It's not hard, right? So W was her Nigerian name, right? Wuraula means gold. She knew all this, but, so this is the important part, right? But nobody had ever called her Wuraula. Not even her mother, whom she could now see from the corner of her eye, making anxious, silent gestures for her to go to her grandfather. Okay, so mother was also kind of anxious, but the important thing here is she was not used to the name W, right? Here in this stone-walled corridor, where the sunlight came in through enormous stiff mosquito screens over every window, and her clothes clung to her like another's skin, Wuraula sounded like another person, not her at all. Okay, Wuraula sounded like another person to whom? To Jay, right? So this name felt very foreign to her. That's how she felt, right? Okay, so that's what we have so far. And then in the next part it says, should she answer to this name and by doing so steal the identity of someone who belonged here? Should she become Rola? Okay, so she was like, I don't know. I don't know how to take on this identity. She doesn't know how to react. So it feels foreign, but she's not sure how to take this in. But how? She could not make herself move forward, so she stayed where she was, avoided his touch, looked up into her grandfather's face, smiled and said quietly but firmly in her most polite voice, "Hello, grandfather." Okay, so fine. That took a while. Okay, so the plot is this. The plot is her grandfather came up to her and called her by her Nigerian name, and she said, "Hello, grandfather." That's the only thing that happened so far, right? But I mean, we have a lot of characterization infused in it, how she's feeling about this, and that kind of thing. So that's like the main thing so far. After they had taken baths and just had been made to eat a little, her mother disappeared with her youngest sister, Auntie Viola, and her father befriended Uncle Connell, who was clearly as newspaper-minded as he was. Okay, so I guess we can take care of all these simple characterizations, right? So I guess uncle and dad, they had something in common. They were newspaper-minded, whatever they are, and they wanted to talk about politics. Okay, so I guess that's what it means, newspaper-minded. They are interested in politics, right? So they kind of hit it off, right? So like they hung out, right? Her mother played with her Imo, right? Your mom went to go play with Imo, and then your dad went to go play with Wesamchon, right? That's it, right? Swiftly dropping a kiss onto her forehead, her father released her into her grandfather's clutches before mounting the stairs that led up to the roof balcony of the house. Okay, so yeah, so now she's going to her grandfather, right? So Jay, our protagonist, is with her grandfather. So her grandfather did have a face. What does this mean? So her grandfather did have a face. Right? I guess, you know, she's only been hearing about him, right? She's only heard about him. She's never met him. So, like, now that she's facing him, she's thinking, okay, this person actually exists. Because, you know, I've only heard about him. It was a broad-lined face. The smile and frown lines ran deep into his skin, his eyes made smaller by the loosened flesh around him. Okay, so this is like a physical description of him. I don't get anything else here. He had the same wide, strong jawline with the determined set as her mother and the same prominent cheekbones, although Jess could see that his were made angular more through blah, blah, blah. He was quite short and moved about very quickly. Okay, so what is all this? Grandfather's physical appearance, physical description of her grandfather. Right? So nothing so special. I mean, I wouldn't say this is like very explicit characterization. It's just painting us a picture in our heads, right? So this part, I guess it's not going to be important. Physical description, always not so important, okay? All right, so let's go to the next part. It says, as Jess sat in the parlor, keeping very still so that she wouldn't take up much space on the brown and white sofa, she allowed herself to stare openly and seriously at her grandfather, and he did the same. Okay, so now they were staring at each other. Okay, so they were just looking at each other. Okay, so I guess that's another important plot point. She felt as if she were a little piece of him that had crumbled off maybe. Okay, so she feels a connection. Do you see that? Okay, so throughout the passage up to this point, there was that sense of uncertainty, like she was kind of nervous and that kind of thing, but now she's feeling as if she's part of him, right? Little piece of him that had crumbled off maybe, which he was examining for flaws and broken bits before deciding whether it was worth taking it to be reattached. It was impossible to tell what he thought of her. Okay, so this from the perspective of our narrator. I mean, not our narrator, our protagonist. So our protagonist did not necessarily know, okay, so what does he think of me? Not sure, right? Next part. She sat at a right angle from him, breathing out silence. He sat very upright, his hands on his knees, the crisp line of his blah, 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 fixing him still in her sight. They were both waiting, supposedly for her Auntie Funk to bring them some soft drinks, but really, Jay sensed that they were waiting to see if they would like each other or not. Okay. So in the end, I guess they're looking at each other, and what's the important thing? They're both looking at each other, but they're not so sure. So I guess they're just kind of 눈치 봐 each other, right? They're meeting for the first time. Her grandfather's like, oh, you know, I'm not sure if my granddaughter's gonna like me. Granddaughter's like, I don't know if grandfather's gonna like me, right? So that's the passage, right? So how does it end? I mean, it's just their kind of awkward first meeting, cross-cultural, right? Okay, so let's go to question number one. Could have been a little bit confusing, so let's take a look at this. In using the phrase uncertain circle, the narrator most nearly means that the family members are, okay, so we don't get any other hints. Usually when I get a question like this, what's the effect of using this phrase? I go to look for a reference point, right? I go to a reference point and I get like another adjective or something like that, and I use this as an anchor to choose my answer. But I don't necessarily see that if I go back to the first paragraph. If you go back to the first paragraph, it's just they stand in an uncertain circle, but he doesn't give us the narrator doesn't give us any more information than that. It just says they're standing in an uncertain circle, but what is that uncertain circle? I don't know. Okay? So I'm not really sure here. So what should you do? Okay, so you should think about the situation as a whole, right? You should think about what you read after this. What was the central conflict? It was that uncertainty, that nervousness that the characters were feeling, right? So that's probably what that uncertain circle is. They don't know how to act, right? It's like a very awkward first meeting. That's how you should solve question number one. So A says disoriented after an unusually difficult journey. We have no idea about this, absolutely no idea. Maybe it was actually pretty easy. The journey was actually pretty easy. I mean, I don't know, I can't say this. Self-conscious and tentative about interacting. So unsure, right? So self-conscious being, they're thinking about, okay, how do I look, you know? What are they going to think of me and that kind of thing. So this is okay, and unsure is also good. So this is a pretty good answer. What about suspicious of each other's motives? Okay, so well, based on what? I have no basis. But this I've been seeing throughout the entire passage, right? They're not sure. I mean, this is even how we end, right? Grandfather and Jay, they're looking at each other and they don't know how to feel, right? And they're just wondering what the other person's gonna think. Dependent, no, it's not dependent. Okay, so let's go over some of the other questions that you guys had on this passage. I would say 2 and 3. No? Or are you sure? Are you just saying that because I said it, or?
No, I actually.
You actually. Yeah. Okay, actually. Okay, fine. So this one is kind of interesting. Why? Because it's not directly stated in the passage. Like it makes it sound as if there's some kind of cause and effect here. So if you take a look, it says, which factor most decisively influences Jess's reaction to meeting her grandfather? Okay, so this is, I guess this needs to be towards the beginning of the passage, right? So I'm looking over the answer choices, but if I take a look at the next question, it's a line reference question. Then that makes things a lot easier. Why? Because I can look for a potential answer that can be in one of these answer choices, in one of these line references. So what am I going to look for? So this is how I'm going to do it. Okay, so which one is a potential influence? So there's going to be some kind of potential influence that determines her reaction. Okay? So based on something, she reacts to her grandfather in a certain way. Okay, so I'm going to check a look at. I'm going to check A first. 1 to 3. So 1 to 3. Well, what's the cause though? Like, okay, so I don't even know what the reaction is here, and I don't know what the potential influence is. I mean, because the first sentence is just saying they all stood in an uncertain circle, but I don't know what caused that. I mean, based on what? I mean, there's nothing that I can say here. What about the next line? What's the next line reference? 3 to 7. 3 to 7. Although he seemed mellower and smaller than the picture that her mother had painted for her over the years, Jess had a sudden and irrational fear. Okay, so here we go. What do we have? We have Jess's reaction to her grandfather, right? So what does she feel? I mean, she had a sudden and irrational fear. Okay? But what was that due to? Okay, I mean, it doesn't state it directly, but the only other factor in this line reference is this, is her mother painted a picture for her about her grandfather. Okay? You want to stand up? Do you want to stand up? I mean, you're sleeping. You're sleeping. Do you want to stand up? Yeah. So the only other factor is this, right? I mean, if we were to choose this line reference, line 3 to 7, the answer needs to be in this answer choice, right? But the only other factor is what her mother said to her about her grandfather. That's the only thing. So if I'm going to choose this line reference, that's going to be my answer, okay? Let's take a look at another one, 8 to 10. Let's take a look at 8 to 10. He looked at her, put his hands on his hips, and her cousins and her mother laughed. Well, I don't see Jay's reaction here, right? I don't see Jay's reaction, so this can't be the answer. Okay? What about the next one? 12 to 15. Her blah 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 blah. Her grandfather held out a hand. His hands were big. Blah blah blah. Took a smile, and then she took a step towards him, smiling a wobbly, nervous smile. Okay, so we have a reaction here. So it's either B or D, right? So I'm talking about the line reference. So in terms of the line reference, B or D. B is what? Her mother's version. Mother's version of grandfather, right? She used to tell her, hey, this is what your grandfather's like, kind of thing, right? What about D? What's the answer for D? The D is, I mean, his grandfather's physical characteristics. Okay, so for number 2, let's take a look at A. His intimidating physical presence and mannerisms. Okay, so if we were to choose A, we would need to pair this up with D, right? So it could be A and D in the line reference, right? His indifference to other, well, we don't see any indifference. Her parents' concerns, well, no, we didn't have that. His mother's descriptions of his temperament. So this one is paired with B. Well, okay, sorry, not A. This one is going to be paired with D. as in the line reference question, right? So this one could be paired with D, this one could be paired with B, okay? So how are you going to choose? How are you going to make that decision then? Where do we go from here? So this is actually really important, guys, okay? Because, I mean, you need to, if you got confused, it means that there's something that you're unsure of, okay? It can go either way from here. What makes you make this call here? Is this how you were confused?
Yeah.
So you were trying to pair A with D, but also D with B worked?
Yeah, I had the.
Which one did you choose?
Oh, I didn't choose. Yeah.
You didn't choose? You just omitted?
Oh, yeah, I ran out of time. So I couldn't
Did you take a look at the answer?
No.
Okay, good. So what do you think now?
I'm thinking A and D.
A and D? Why is that?
Because it feels, because D contains her reaction directly. Well, wait, it feels.
Okay, so this is what I want you to do, okay? So you come at a crossroads, okay? So this is actually really important. This is what you should write down in your notes, okay? You should look at every single word, okay? What do I mean, look at every single word? I'm going to be thinking about this. Okay, so his intimidating physical presence, and also there's his mannerisms, right? So this is number 1, and this is number 2. Do you agree? So he has an intimidating physical presence, and he also has intimidating mannerisms, right? What does that mean? Physical presence. Well, physical presence would be like he's like very tall, right? Or, you know, we were talking about his hands or whatever, right? So it could be that. What's his mannerism? How he acts, right? So, I mean, okay, what about this one? Her mother's ominous descriptions of his temperament. I mean, yeah, this possibly. But now I want to go back and I want to take another look, but I'm going to dissect it a little bit more and I'm going to see if this is actually there, okay? Physical presence versus mannerism. Okay. So this was D, so line 12, right? Take a look at line 12. Held out a hand. Okay, so he held out a hand. His hands were big and square, blah, blah, blah. Palm deeply etched and blah, blah, blah. This is, I guess, his physical presence. I don't know. She took a step towards him, smiling. Where's his mannerism? Where's his intimidating mannerism? There's none. It's just he held out his hand. You know what I mean? But, I mean, what are you going to say about his mannerism? You know what I mean? Like, his intimidating mannerism would be something, I mean, if he did something really crazy or something like that. So, I mean, you want to be, when it comes to this close of a call, okay? I mean, I'm happy that you at least thought about this, that you were trying to use 2 different pairs. But once you get to that point, what you need to do is you need to look at all the elements in the answers, and you need to be able to substantiate all of them, okay? And we didn't have that mannerism bit here, okay? So that's why I would go with D. How could we say that her mother had an ominous description? Because we had that comparison, right? We had that comparison in the beginning. What does it say? Mellower and smaller than the picture that her mother had painted. So I guess the mother painted a larger and more stern picture of her grandfather. Pretty scary guy, right? So that's how I can substantiate that. So that's why that's the pair that I'm going to use. Good? Okay, are there any other questions that we need to go over in this passage? Yuna? Okay, number 5 and 6 really quick. Let's take a look. Which choice best describes Jess's initial reaction to being addressed as W? Okay, and this is not a line reference question. Do you know that? It's not a line reference question. I mean, it's not paired with 5. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. Okay. So, initial reaction to her being called W. Okay, so I'm just going to do this. I'm just going to go to this part physically. Where does it say W? And then after I find that, I'm going to find a characterization of J that follows immediately after that. That's all I'm gonna do, right? Okay, so I'm just gonna go to with the part here, right? So she froze, not knowing what to say or do. Okay, so like she was kind of she doesn't know how to act, right? Because she knew that this was her name, but she was just so not used to being called this name. That was the thing. Okay, so I'm just, my initial instinct, I'm just going to look for that, right? She resents? No, she doesn't know how to act. I'm like, nobody calls me you saying your name is Junsung? Yeah. Nobody calls me Junsung. I don't know how to act to that. Recognizes the name. Okay, that's good. She did recognize the name, but cannot recall its no, she does recall the meaning. It said gold, so this is gone. She is startled that her grandfather has remembered. No. Okay, what does it mean startled? She's kind of surprised that her father even remembers her name. No. Well, it's just that she's never been called that name. So she was aware that it is her name, but is unable to acknowledge it. Yeah, so D is the right answer. What about 6? Okay, so you need to, okay, so this is actually really good. So when it comes to line reference questions, okay, so I saw that you guys got a lot of textual evidence questions wrong. What that means is you're not consistent. You're not consistent in doing the line reference thing, okay? What do I mean by that? Okay, so, all right, guys, think about this. Okay? Don't roll your eyes. Remember this. Michael is smart. You guys remember this? So in line 1, it says, Michael is smart. Line 2 says, he got a 1600 on his SAT. And then in one of the questions, it asks us, hey, what does the passage suggest about Michael? And then one of the answers said, intelligent. And then in the line reference, it said, which of the following provides the best evidence for the answer to the previous question? So line reference question. And then A said line 1, B said line 2 to 3. Okay, so I chose this. Which one should I choose for the line reference question? Is it A or B? Is it A? Yeah. If you're getting line reference questions wrong, if you're getting textual evidence questions wrong, it means you're doing this. What does that mean? It means you're actually thinking. You shouldn't think. For line reference questions, it's not a matter of thinking. It's searching and identifying and rephrasing. Okay? This is so important, guys. You're not supposed to think when you're looking for line reference questions. Okay? You're just going and finding the elements. So what did I say about this? It means that line 1 contains this element, this being element 1, right? Michael being element 1. And intelligent being element 2. These two things need to be in here. That's what a line reference question is. It's not you thinking about it. It's not you making any inferences. You're not thinking about anything. It's just you locating it and finding it. Jess is familiar with some of the customs that her mother's family observes. I'm finding this. I'm not thinking, okay? I'm not choosing an answer choice that supports this. I'm choosing this statement alone in the line reference, okay? So let's take a look at A. So 23 to 26. Well, Jess is, well, okay, let's get this straight. Jess is familiar with some of the customs. Okay? Jess knows the customs, right? Oh, yeah, I know some Nigerian customs, right? So that's what we need. Jess knows some Nigerian customs. So 23. Where's 23? Of course, she knew that W was her Y name. There we go. Blah, blah, blah. Nigerian naming ceremony. Yeah. So A is the right answer. Okay? Which one were you confused with? B. Let's take a look at B. So 29 to 32. 29 to 32. No. Okay? So where does it say that she's familiar with Nigerian customs? Nowhere. Do you know what I mean? I mean, it's nobody had ever called her W. Well, it's talking about nobody called her W, whom she could now see from the corner of her eye. Well, her mother was making gestures. Well, how do I know about Nigerian culture? I need Nigerian culture and the fact that Jay is familiar with them. Okay? So I'm glad that you asked this because this is very, very, very big. At least, okay, so you know how you get paired questions, like these kinds of paired questions. It's okay if you get this question wrong. I mean, it's not ideal, but I would be okay. I mean, we could improve. Like you can get this question wrong, but you should never ever get this question wrong. You shouldn't get the textual evidence question wrong because it's just a matter of locating it. If you're getting textual evidence wrong, you better get both wrong, first of all. Okay? If you're getting both wrong, then it means you looked for a different pair. But even then, it's kind of you thought about it in the wrong way. But what I don't want to see happening is you get this question wrong, right? And if you get this question wrong, it means you have no idea how to do a line reference question. It means you're choosing this consistently as an answer choice. Okay? So I never want to see that happen. Do you know what I mean? So what I mean is this, okay? You get this question right, you get this wrong. This should not happen. You should either do this. You should either get this wrong and this right, or both wrong. So these two are okay, these two scenarios. It's okay if something like this happens. But if you're doing this, it means that you're doing this when you're doing the line reference questions. So if you take a look at your test, okay, I mean not now, but once you go home, if you take a look at your test and you see any instances like these, it means that you don't know how to do a line reference question properly. Okay? Okay, so we're done with that passage, right? Okay, let's take a quick break and then we're gonna come back to writing. Okay, so we're gonna do some writing questions. don't just look at these questions, just try to solve these questions and move on. That's the worst thing that you can do on the writing section. So on the writing section, always read the first paragraph thoroughly. So treat it as if it's a reading passage, okay? So it's not necessarily, don't think of it as a writing passage, think of it as a reading passage. Like, you need to get what it's trying to say, especially because the writing passages, they're usually pretty top heavy. They introduce the information that's going to follow. They set up the tone, they set up the information, and and also the title. The title is also a pretty big hint. So the title and also read the first paragraph. Okay, so that's what we're gonna do. What we're gonna do right now. The pioneers of the Great Exodus. Okay, so I don't know what it means by the Great Exodus. I mean, it could be really anything, right? But what is that? Okay, so at the end of the Reconstruction era that followed the American Civil War, okay, so it's some kind of exodus that happened in United States history. So it's not necessarily about Jews or whatever. But anyway, tens of thousands of black former slaves left the southern United States for social and economic opportunity in the western states and territories. So this is probably the Great Exodus that it's talking about, right? So that's pretty simple, right? So after the Reconstruction era, they left and they went to new places, right? The movement was known as the Great Exodus, and the participants came to be called exodusters. Okay? So the passage is probably going to be talking about the Great Exodus. It's just probably going to give us more information about it. I don't know what the information that's about to follow. Okay, so now you can go and you can solve the questions. Okay, so you can work on some questions on the way, but make sure you read this thoroughly. Okay, so it's talking about black former slaves leaving the South, going into the western states and territories. That's what the Great Exodus is. Okay, so you should know that. Okay, and another thing. Okay, so now when you're taking the test, what you should always be thinking about is you want to identify the question type. Right? That's how you solve writing questions, right? It's not necessarily you trying to solve them blindly. Don't do that. Okay? Always try to identify the question type, even though it might seem obvious. And when you're reviewing the test, now I want you guys to write all the question types right next to this. So if you take a look here, it's going to be a pronoun question, right? So what I want you to do is write next to it, okay, this is a pronoun question, okay? So when you're reviewing for the test, do this. And when you're taking the test, also do this. I mean, you don't need to necessarily write it down if you don't have enough time, but at least think about it, right? You should get into the habit of that, right? That's how we're going to reduce the numbers. Okay, we want to get less than we want to get everything except the diction questions or the conventional expression questions, idioms, right? I mean, those we can't control, but all the other ones we can. Okay, we can always get them right. So let's just try this one. I'm going to try number 3. So just to refresh your guys' memories, okay? So this is for you. Appropriate context for the discussion that follows. Okay, so a common trap that you can fall into when you're solving like a setup question or like an intro question. This one is also similar in that it says most appropriate context, that kind of thing. Usually what happens when you're getting these types of questions wrong is that you're not thinking about the question. You're just thinking, I mean, you just look at this information and it's like, I'm just going to pick one that fits. No, not necessarily. When you're reading this next paragraph, you're going to circle, okay? So this is, okay, so you guys should always do this, right? So, I mean, this one is talking about discussion that follows in the passage. So you want to look for all the key phrases and you want to circle them physically, okay? That's the only way that you can trust yourself. If you don't do that, you're just going by your instinct, okay? So always do that, okay? Did you guys do that? Did you do that? Yuna? Did you do that? Okay, circle or underline, it doesn't matter, but you need to make some kind of physical annotation, okay? So it's extremely important. I mean, like, just do it, okay? Okay, so what I'm gonna do here is I'm just gonna read here and I'm gonna see what the gist of it is. Most popular destination was Kansas. Okay, so popular destination, Kansas. And it's explaining why Kansas was a popular destination. And one settlement in that state was N, a town in northern Kansas. Okay, so it's going into more specifics, right? It's talking about Kansas was a popular destination, and it says, and it mentions another town in Kansas. Okay, so it's talking about a destination. All right, so let's take a look at the answer choices, okay? So A says, during this time, travel from one part of the country to another took days or even weeks, and the dangers. Okay, so if A were to be the answer, I would need the duration or the dangers to be expanded upon in the following paragraph. But I don't see that. Right? So that's why A is not the answer, okay? So if you want to, so this is how you should think, okay? So now, I mean, we took kind of a cursory approach to other, in our earlier classes, but now, if you're getting these kinds of questions wrong, if you're getting like a focus or support question wrong, it means, what you need to start doing is you need to be able to pinpoint why the wrong answers are wrong. The reason why A is wrong here is because it does not elaborate on the duration or the dangers in the following part. It just talks about a most popular destination. So so that's why A is wrong. What about B? Let's take a look at B. Settlers from Kentucky, Tennessee, and Missouri were part of the Great Exodus. Okay, so then I would need to discuss Kentucky or Missouri in the following part. But I don't see that. We're talking about Kansas. So of course B is not the answer. C. Great Exodus has parallels to large-scale migrations that occur in the United States during the 20th century. Well, no. I need to talk about other migrations in the 20th century then, if C were to be the answer. That's why C is not the answer, right? We're still talking about the Great Exodus. So no. What about D? Drawn by the promise of farming, blah, 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 Exodusters founded dozens of communities in the West. Okay, so communities in the West, and then we talk about these. Kansas, and then a town. So these were probably the communities. So that's possible. So that's why D is the answer, okay? All right, so starting from number 1 to 11, if you guys have any questions on this first passage, let's go over some of them. 4. Okay, I'm just going to do 4 first, and then let's move on to the other one, okay? So this one, should we add this or no, right? Should we add this or no? And what's the first thing that you should think about? So the first thing that you should be thinking about is, what are the scenarios in which I could add this? What are the scenarios where I can't add this? Okay, so a scenario that you can include this is, of course, relevant detail. Relevant detail being that, this is going to be our location, right? Since this is our location, if this sentence is an elaboration on this previous sentence, then it's fine, right? In any case, that's fine, right? That's called a relevant detail. But on the other hand, if it's irrelevant detail, I can't really use that. There's a really fine line between relevant detail and irrelevant detail. I'll be talking about this just in a second. But also, okay, so another thing that can happen is logical gap. This thing that we talked about, right? Bridging the logical gap. Do you guys remember this? And another thing that you can include is something that undermines the claim that's been already made, right? So something that goes against what we've read. We can't include that, right? Okay, I want to add to this. So these were the ones that we talked about, right? This is the very basic idea, but I want to build on this a little bit more, okay? If the sentence that we're talking about is at the beginning of the passage, then this could potentially be a setup sentence, right? In that case, I can add it, right? If it's like an appropriate intro or something. If it's an intro in the beginning of the paragraph, then I can include it. Or it can be a conclusion. Like if I'm talking about like at the very end. If I had 4 like right here, it could be like a conclusion to this paragraph. That's okay if it does that, okay? But right now, we don't need to think about that, right? Because it's in the middle of the paragraph, okay? What's another thing that can be included? Well, let's think about this. If we can include relevant detail, what if it's a general point that is to be elaborated upon in the next sentence? What I'm saying is, if this sentence, starting with real estate agents, if this sentence is gonna be a detail and this sentence is gonna be a general point, that's fine. You know what I mean? If this sentence becomes a detail that's going to elaborate on this general point, that's okay, right? You guys good, right? All right, so let's take a look. So I don't need to think about this necessarily because it's in the middle of the paragraph, okay? So what I'm gonna ask myself is, gonna read this, and I'm gonna especially I'm gonna pay attention to this sentence when I'm reading the previous sentence. Because this could potentially be the general point that is elaborated upon in this sentence. And it does kind of sound like a detailed sentence because it's talking about very specific eras here, right? Between 1870 and 1879. Well, anyway, let's take a look. Most popular destination, Kansas. Because of its role, blah, 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 blah. One settlement was this. This is the sentence that we read, right? So this is the information that we have. What about the next part? The next part says, real estate agents mentioned N in brochures and newspapers, but the reality that exodusters confronted on arrival was less appealing. Oh, okay, so real estate agents, they kind of advertise this, but actually, it was less appealing. So what do we have? We kind of have an expectation versus reality, right? So people were moving in there like, oh, so excited to go to this place. But what happened actually? Actually, it was less appealing. So that's the idea that's here, okay? So let's take a look at this sentence now. Between 1870 and 1879, approximately 10,000 exodusters entered Kansas. All right, let's think about this. Okay, I could see why you would be a little bit confused with this. Well, first of all, we're already done talking about Kansas. We already talked about Kansas here, and now we moved on to a new town named N. But it seems like if we include how many people moved into Kansas, it seems like we're kind of backtracking and all of a sudden elaborating on this first sentence. That you cannot do. Do you know what I mean? And I mean, it has nothing to do with the sentence that comes after this either. So I don't know if this could be a relevant detail. So I am going to start off reading C and D. C says it contradicts information. Well, I don't know. I mean, I'm pretty sure it doesn't contradict any kind of information. It digresses from the discussion of the settlement of N. Yeah, this is exactly what I talked about. We mentioned Kansas here, and then we talked about N here, but why backtrack and talk about Kansas here again? So I'm leaning towards this, but I'm just curious. So if you're unsure, then you can check A and B if you're unsure. Okay? And if you say you're consistently getting confused on these types of questions, you should definitely check these out. So A says, because it sheds light on an aspect of the settler's back. Well, we don't know anything about the settler's background. This is just talking about how popular it was. It's just talking about the scale, right? How popular of a destination Kansas was. So so A is gone. What about B? Because it provides a historical context. Well, no, it doesn't give us any history. It's just saying a lot of people moved there. It's not the historical context. Did you choose B? No. A? No. C? No. Okay. Which one could you not eliminate? Why were you confused with this?
I was kind of, well, I was a bit hesitant.
Okay. So I see your test booklet, and you just did this. Right? So you didn't mark anything. So why you had that element of uncertainty is you didn't look at all the answer choices, and you didn't eliminate them. If you looked at them one by one and you eliminated them, I feel like you could have done that. No?
Well, no, I was thinking of whether or not like it's possible to add this like based on that fine line between like relevant detail and irrelevant detail.
Yeah. But what I'm saying is, even if it is relevant detail, these are false statements. It's not saying it's relevant detail. It's saying something else. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
This one says, does this say something about the settlers' backgrounds? Meaning like they were usually farmers, or that would be something like the settlers' background, right? What about the historical context? Historical context is, putting it in a broader context. This is the time period where this happened. Well, this is not a historical context. This is more like elaborating on it's a really popular destination. Do you know what I mean? So that's why, I mean, it's not relevant. Even if you thought it was relevant detail, if you read the answers, none of them say it's a relevant detail. That's why you can get rid of these. Next. Between 1 and 11. Okay, let's take a look at number 6. Okay, well, this one I can't really help you with, okay? So diction questions, I mean, even if I do explain this to you, it's not gonna help you at all, because chances are you're never gonna get this question ever again. Diction questions don't repeat, right? So, well, but anyway, so some exodusters return to the familiar blank of their home states, decided to stay in their new farming villages. Okay, so this one, okay, I mean, the answer is B, terrain, right? They weren't really used to the new land, so they reverted back to the old ones that they were familiar with. This is talking about like how the land looks like. I mean, how the kind of land and that kind of thing. That's terrain, right? Or it could mean their area, right? Next one. Okay, so this is something that you can overlook, okay? So when it comes to sentence structure questions, I'm not saying this question in particular is hard or anything, but when it comes to sentence structure questions, if you're not getting 100% of the questions right when it comes to sentence structure questions, and even if you are, there's room for error if you don't mark the subject and verb and conjunctions. Okay, so you should always physically mark them, meaning some exodusers return to the familiar expanse of their home states, and then it says, but others, including blah, 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 decided. So we have this, right? Subject, verb. So this is what we have, subject, verb, subject, verb. Now, with this information in mind, you want to take a look at this. You know what I mean, right? So you should always mark the, and also I guess we have all the buts here, so this is going to be a coordinating conjunction, right? So that's how you should start looking at this question. You should physically annotate all the subject, verbs, and conjunctions. If you don't do that, there's always room for error. Okay, any others? Between 1 and 11. What kind of question is 8? So this is one type of question that I do not want to see you guys getting wrong. What type of question is this, Matt? Yeah, it's a modifier question. Possessing. So it started with the verb ing, right? Verb ing, and then do we have any subjects or verbs here? No, right? It's just the verb ing, and then comma, and then we have the main clause here, right? So this verb ing is always going to modify the first noun that's going to come after the comma, right? So this question, you don't necessarily need to read any of this, right? So who possessed less wealth? So it's not going to be horses who possess less wealth, right? It's got to be people, right? So I'm just looking at this. I'm just looking at the first noun. So when it's a front modifier question, it's always a 2-second question, okay? You identify that it's a front modifier question. You always look at the beginning of the sentence. You just look at that noun, and usually it's people, right? So that's what you should be doing, okay? So C is the right answer here, right? Okay, any others? If not, we're going to go to the second passage. Okay, so let's go to the second passage, number 12 to 22. So anywhere between 12 and 22, if you have any questions, let's take a look here, okay? So anything that you were unsure of, I mean, you guys can ask me, like, even if you weren't particularly confused, if there was an aspect of a particular question that confused you, I want you guys to ask me that, okay? 17. Let's take a look at 17 first, and then if we have anything before that, we can come back to it. Let's take a look. Okay, so when we're doing sentence structure, sentence order questions, what's the first thing that we should do, Matt?
Well, we should recognize that there are three instances where we need to look for. So
No.
So those are like
No. 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 Actually, no. No. Really, no. Yeah. You know, what's the thing that we need to do? Hmm? What about pronouns? No. Well, that's wrong too.
Are you sure it's not those three things?
Yeah.
What?
What?
Wait, what?
What?
Wait, is it like the transition word? Looking for like transition?
Yeah, I'm sure.
It's not those.
It's not those. Well, okay. So I want you guys to get in the habit of reading first, right? So I mean, this one it just gave us an extra sentence, but you know, it could have potentially been something like this, right? It could have asked us, hey, where would sentence 2 go, right? In that case, what should I do? I should leave out sentence 2 and read the entire thing, right? I should just read 1, 3, 4, 5, right? Something like that. And then while I'm reading, I want to circle the key phrases, okay? So if you want to do it the right way, you should read this part first, and then you should circle or underline all the key phrases. That's how I want you to go about it. That's the first step, okay? So read and identify the key phrases. And then we go to the sentence and do that thing that we talked about, right? So what are the 3 things that we're looking for? Transition, pronoun, and compressive nouns, right? You guys remember that? So, okay, let's take a look here, all right? So Hume was a part of a team of paleontologists that employed 3D laser scanning to produce high-resolution images. Okay, so he was part of a team, and what did they do? They used 3D laser scanning, right? So pretty simple, right? What about 2? The team used the images to reconstruct a more streamlined model of dodo skeletal structure. Okay, so they used the images and they came up with the more streamlined model of dodo skeletal structure, right? So they used the images, came up with the model. Sentence 3, Hume noted that the robust kneecaps of R, along with blah, 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 would have provided them with the strength and maneuverability to easily navigate the rocky and densely forested landscape. Okay, so it's this, right? Leg bones and pelvis, they provided them with the strength and the ability to do this, right? And that's Hume's position, right? And then sentence 4, prominence of these features. Okay, so prominence of these features suggests, so this is the significance, right? Well-developed musculature, right? Okay, so that's what we have, right? And then based on this, I'm gonna read this. And what sticks out here? This is what sticks out to me the most also, right? So whatever that's going to follow before this, it's also going to be the team's argument. Whatever follows before this. Okay, so let's take a look. Argued for the anatomical difference of the ridges and indentations of the dodo's wing bones. Okay. All right, so my first instinct is I want to put this after sentence 4. That's my first instinct, okay? I'm not saying it's wrong, okay? I'm not saying that's right, but that's my first instinct. Why? Because I noted that this is the significance. But also I'm thinking I could put this after sentence 3. Why? Because sentence 3 is talking about what Hume noted, right? So I have those 2 possibilities. Then what am I going to do? I want to think about this then. If I'm going to put it after sentence 3, there's these features, okay? So if I choose to put this sentence after sentence 3, then these features are going to be these, right? But if I don't put it here, then these features are going to be thick leg bones and broad pelvis. I guess it's going to be that, right? I mean, so there's that element of variability. So you need to check that sentence that comes after the potential part also. So now I want to think, okay? So let's take a look. I mean, if we keep it as it is right now, if we don't include this, then would that make any sense? Suggest a well-developed, indicating that the wings, while small in size, relative, likely enhance the dodo speed. Okay, so now I'm taking a look at this part. But now I see that the wings are also mentioned here, right? So, I mean, I would need to mention the wing bones before sentence 4. Okay, So that's why sentence 3, after sentence 3 would be better. Because, I mean, this sentence is talking about, oh, this is why the ridges and indentations in the wing bones are so important. And then we explain that in sentence 4. That's why C is better than D. Okay, any other questions? 12 to 22. Really? I mean, sorry guys, got some questions wrong. So it's all in the back? Maybe? So nothing up to 22? Okay, what about 23 to 33 then? $28. Okay, so if you were confused with this question, okay, so you need the word rather, okay, is used as a conjunctive adverb, okay. Which one did you choose here? Okay, so this is a conjunctive adverb. Do you know what I mean? So it's not a conjunction. So you can't do this. You know what I mean? Because I don't have any conjunctions if I just try to put this together using a comma. So I need to do something else, like put it here, right? So make this into 2 separate clauses. Then I know that this is going to be in a contrast. These 2 clauses are going to be in contrast relationship. What about D though? D is actually grammatically correct. Like grammatically, it's okay. Okay, I'm just talking about grammar. Why? Because if I put rather here, this transition is suggesting that this sentence, right? This sentence and the sentence before this are in a contrast relationship, right? But that's not the contrast that you should be going for. If you read this, they use their talents on big picture initiatives such as building the capacity and blah, 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 right? So it's direct services such as delivering food, right? So it's not this, but it's this. So these 2 things, these 2 clauses need to be in a contrast relationship. So that's why you need to stop in the middle and use this as a conjunctive adverb and suggest that these 2 clauses are in a contrast relationship. It's not necessarily detail. If I use a colon, it's going to be detail that's following after this, right? Another one? 34 to 44 then? Okay, so okay, no offense. You definitely need to work on that add or deleting, because this is like a common theme for you, right? All the questions that you've asked me so far, it's about like adding, deleting, or like the focus of focus of the paragraph or that kind of thing. So you need to work on this. And how do you work on that? Well, it's the same thing that I talked about, right? So what are the scenarios that you can add it, right? That's the first thing that you should be thinking about, right? Relevance, right? Relevance is always, it always pertains to the previous sentence, right? That kind of thing, right? Well, anyway, this one, I mean, it's just adding a lot of information, but in order for me to know this, I need to take a look at the paragraph itself and see the flow. Okay, so let's take a look starting from here. Granting him permission to make drawings and cast blah blah blah. The permit also allow him to take away any pieces of stone with inscriptions or figures. Right, so I guess I mean, it was talking about this English guy or whatever, and then like he got a permit to take away these like valuable things and that kind of thing, you know, it's elaborating on that. After finding that many of these sculptures had been harmed and that others were being sold to tourists, Elgin decided to take full advantage of the permit and arranged to take many of its sculptures to Britain. Right? Okay, so. He saw that they were being harmed, and then after that, what he did was he got a permit, and then he wanted to take the sculptures to Britain. And then it says some public figures immediately questioned the legitimacy of his good intentions. Okay, rightfully so. Okay, so you see this flow? Like, so he was allowed to take away any pieces of these. And so he thought they were harmed, they were being harmed. So he got a permit and he wanted to take them to Britain, and then other people questioned his intentions. And then what does it say? To them, it seemed that L was stealing rather than protecting an important part of Greek culture. Okay, so what's an instance of this? This is an instance of bridging the logical gap. Okay, because if you just say questioned the legitimacy of his seemingly good intentions, it doesn't go all the way. Even it might seem obvious to you when you're reading it, there is a logical gap if you think about it. I mean, you don't need to come to that realization while you're reading this paragraph, but when you see this, it's like, oh, okay, this is why. This is why they questioned his legitimacy, right? Do you understand? So this is an instance of bridging the logical gap. So, I mean, let's take a look. A says, it clarifies the opinions of the public figures in a way that helps establish the focus of the passage. So this would be suggesting that, right? So if you don't include this, you might be a little bit confused as to why they would question his intentions. But if you do this, yeah, we know exactly why they questioned his intentions, right? What their motivations were and that kind of thing. So that's why A is the right answer here. Did you choose A? Yeah. Okay. Next one. Okay, effective transition between the discussion of the committee's investigation and the next event in the narrative. Okay, so I mean, this is just asking for a transition, right? So I'm gonna look at what happened before and I'm gonna look at what happened after. And I'm going to look for an intermediary sentence that can connect the previous event to the next event. So what's the previous event? Following an investigation, a British parliamentary committee concluded in 1816 that Britain should give asylum to these sculptures. Okay, so that's That's what they decided, right? They needed to give asylum, right? And then in the next part it says, after Greece gained independence, however, some argued that the agreement Elgin made with the Ottoman government was totally bogus. Well, I need to change this, but let's just read it as it is right now. Was totally bogus, and that the sculptures should be returned, right? Okay, so this is what happened, right? British Parliamentary Committee, what did they say? Hey, these should come to Britain, right? They should be in Britain. These sculptures belong in Britain because, they could potentially be harmed and whatever. But in the sentence after that, like it says, some people argued, like blah, 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 and it doesn't count, and you guys need to return the sculptures. Okay, so let's take a look at the answer choices. So A says, Lord Byron sailed in Greece to support the Greek quest. I guess it kind of it connects to this idea. It connects to Greece's independence, I guess, but I don't know how that's going to serve as. Does that touch upon any idea that's been mentioned before? Are we talking about the sculptures or whatever? No, I don't think so. So that's why A is not the answer. What about B? The concept of asylum typically applies. Okay, so yeah, it's talking about asylum. Like it's giving us like a general description of what giving us like the concept of asylum is. But how does that connect to the next idea in terms of the sequence of events? So it does connect to the previous sentence, but not necessarily the sentence after that. What about C? They were installed in the British Museum that same year. Okay. Asylum, and then they were in the British museums, and then they said, hey, you guys should return that. So that makes that connects the dots. So this one is okay. They no longer had the vivid colors. Well, I have no idea why we're talking about that. We're talking about giving asylum, taking it back, that kind of thing. So C should be the closest one here. Next. Hello?
43.
Okay, so there's two types of sentence combination questions. Two types of sentence combination. There are the short ones. So this is a short sentence combination question. Do you know what I mean by that? This one, if you take a look, we underlined only portions, right? It's not like they underlined the entire two sentences. You know what I mean? As opposed to this, we also have questions where you underline both sentences, and then we have like really long answer choices. We did a lot of these. Do you remember this? So when it comes to these, it's different. But so when it comes to these, we'll do it when we come to these questions, okay? We did a lot of these. But when it comes to short ones, what you should be thinking about is, the first thing is concision, okay? Concision in these cases would just be shorter answer choices. What I mean by that is 9 times out of 10, okay, the answer is going to be the shortest one. 9 times out of 10. So you just want to check the shortest one first and see if that's grammatically correct. Okay? Remember how when we're doing these, we talked about the meaning and the relationship, grammar, before we talked about concision, right? But here you want to go the other way around. Okay? You want to think about concision first. So you want to check the shortest one, like physically the shortest one first, and check if that makes grammatical sense, if that's the same thing. So let's see here. 2015, Greek government decided not to pursue legal action against Britain. Okay, Greek government decided not to pursue legal action, and then this is also the Greek government. It opted instead for continued diplomatic efforts. Okay, so opting. Okay, so this is a back modifier, right? Okay, so it's going to be right. Because if it's a back modifier, it gives us a lot of leeway to modify the right thing, right? And in that case, it's this opting instead is going to modify the Greek government, which is correct. That's exactly what we want, right? And you know, even if like for short sentence combination questions, you can just guess. You could even try guessing. I mean, I'm not saying don't. I mean, I'm not saying do it. But even if you guess the shortest one, 9 times out of 10, you're going to be right. So just check, just make that check. Okay? Just check if it makes grammatical sense. If the meaning doesn't change or if the grammar isn't wrong, then it's the right answer choice. What if it is the wrong answer choice? Then you want to look at other ones that are preferably short. Okay, so you want to look for that concision first. Okay. Others? Wait, let me take a look at your answer sheet. Huh. Didn't ask a bunch of questions.
Well, I don't know which ones I got, so I'm not sure which ones stands.
Okay, so why don't you guys take a look at your answer sheets now then? Just for writing, okay? Just for writing, take a look. See how terribly you did. And okay, which ones do we need to do? I mean, I see a lot of X's there. I mean, not a lot, but I see X's. 29?
Yeah.
Well, didn't you get 28 wrong also? Oh, well, we did 28. 29. Okay, so wait, what? Wait, which one did you choose for 29? B. Oh. Okay, what do I need before a colon? What needs to come here?
Independent clause.
No. Wrong. Just okay, I mean technically you're right, but that's why you got this question wrong. Because you thought independent clause. You need to say complete sentence. Yeah, complete sentence. Because can you? Okay, so let's see if you can end. Let's see if this is a complete sentence. Dyson enthusiastically explains that her role at the farmers markets involves. Is that a complete sentence? No, right? You see what I mean? Although we do have a subject and a verb, so it might seem like it's an independent clause. Like the sentence alone cannot make any sense. Like you don't say involves and then you stop. If it involves something, you need to mention it, right? So that's why A. I mean, wait, did you say you chose B?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's why B is wrong. Do you understand?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, C is of course wrong. Why? Because I mean, you explained that, but you don't necessarily need a comma here, right? What about A? explains that, yeah, same deal, right? Dyson enthusiastically explains that. Is this a sentence? Is this a complete sentence? No. Explains that her role, right? That's what we're trying to convey here. So A is not right. So D is the right answer. Okay? So always remember, before a semicolon or a colon, you need a complete sentence. It needs to be able to stand on its own. Okay? You can't stop in the middle of a sentence. Do you understand? And also, yeah, actually, okay. Well, but for semicolons though, you can also have a list. Do you remember that? Listing A, B, and or C, right? So just remember this could happen also when it comes to semicolons. Okay, next one. Oh, you got destroyed here. Okay. So, oh. Oh, no, that's 27. Okay. Did you also get 27 wrong? So let's take a look here. This says salaries may be low, but, okay, so salaries are low, but the experience is rewarding. That's the first idea, and then we move on saying the program's dedication to assisting people in need makes the work especially, so do you think this needs to go along in alignment with rewarding? Yeah, right? Like these two words need to go along the same line, right? So rewarding work, right? And also what? Reassuring work? No, that doesn't make any sense. Thankful work? Satisfactory work? It's gratifying to people who do it, right? What does it mean gratifying? Like it's like you do something and you feel like personal fulfillment and that kind of thing, right? That's what we're trying to get across. And the only word that does that here is gratifying. The work itself is gratifying to the people who perform the work. Any others? I mean, this one is okay. I mean, like, it's diction, so I'm not too mad. Number 20. Oh, okay. So this is actually a pretty common one. And also, you know, nowadays in the reading section, this one shows up a lot. Potential counterargument, right? Which one puts down a potential counterargument? What is a potential counterargument? And that kind of thing, right? So what is this one saying? The writer wants to acknowledge a potential objection, right? So she wants to make a concession. That's what it means, right? She wants to say, hey, okay, I know that there are some downsides or that kind of thing, or something like, I know you guys, the opponents, you guys have a point, but, and then do something like that. To the means by which Gold and her team reached their conclusion. Okay, so it's about a potential objection, and that in regards to the means by which they reached their conclusion. So there was a way that they reached their conclusions, but she wants to say, yeah, I know that this is somewhat weak, right? I know that you guys could actually say something bad about this. Something like that. So A says, while brain volume is not an infallible indicator. Okay, so this sounds like something they might say. They might say like, hey, brain volume alone cannot be an indicator of intelligence, right? And she acknowledges this. So, I mean, I'm just going to leave this one. Regardless of the context, this could be a potential objection, right? What about B? Comparing dodos to Neanderthals, another underestimate what? What's the potential objection? That I have no idea. Despite the fact that the dodo is extinct, well, what would that potential objection be then? I don't know. Can't think of any. Since the dodo's brain value was correlated to its body size, I don't know. I mean, okay, so, and I really like the word while here. Because if you take a look here, Gold's team concluded that the dodo was not all that dim-witted. They're not dumb, right? So it's saying, hey, I understand that you guys might say this, but they concluded that this, right? So this is a pretty common format that you need to be familiar with, especially in the writing section. Nowadays, they show up a lot. The potential counterargument. There were also some potential counter-argument or which one strengthens the argument kind of thing in the reading section. Okay, next. Done?
Yeah.
You're not done? Okay, so what you should do, you should keep track of what types of questions you're getting wrong, or okay, so not just the ones that you're getting wrong, ones that you were confused with. Okay, so if a certain question confused you, even though you got it right, it means that there's a possibility that you could get it wrong, right? Like some of the questions that you asked me, even if you got it wrong, you said you weren't sure of a certain aspect in that question, right? So you should take notes. I mean, you keep count of that, and yeah, okay. So all right, then let's take a break before we go on to the reading section, and we finish off some reading passages. Okay. Okay, if you guys had to choose the hardest passage on the reading section, which one would that be? Would it be history? No?
Social science.
Social science, which, huh?
The brain one.
Which one is that? The third one?
Oh, the second one.
Hmm?
The second one.
The second one? What about you?
Probably the third one.
So if you thought the second one was hard, you were reading. Okay? You shouldn't be reading. You should be you should be more expecting and looking for the structure. Okay? Second passage, it's not supposed to be difficult. Third one, probably. Okay? Why would you think the third one is difficult? Because it has a lot of information. I mean, or at least it seems like there's a lot of information, and the vocabulary that they use seems very unfamiliar. Okay, that's why you were confused. I mean, that's why it might seem like it's hard, right? The vocabulary just kind of turned you off. So, what do you? Can I take a look at your passage, just from here? Okay. Okay, fine.
Or is there something
Huh?
Is there something wrong with it?
No. So what I want you guys to do, I mean, not now, but for homework, is I want you guys to try and make an outline for all the passages that we did. I mean, you don't need to do that for literature because we did it together, but I mean, I guess we'll cover the third passage right now, and then for homework, you guys should try outline it. Okay. So let's take a look. Okay. So I mean, I can understand why you think this would be hard, but it's I mean, similar reasons. So if you thought the second passage was hard, you were reading. You were just immersed in it, right? You shouldn't be immersed in the passage. Like, you shouldn't be having fun reading it. I'm not saying you were having fun, but I'm saying, like, don't try and understand every single sentence. Look for the gist of it and expect what's going to happen. And same for this passage. If you try to go by sentence, it might seem difficult. Okay, so how should we do it? Let's talk about that. Okay, so passage is talking about evolution. Okay, so whenever you get evolution, you should be thinking about changes, right? Changes that happen, and also what motivates that change, right? Because evolution is about natural selection, right? You guys learned that in school, right? So certain environments, certain factors are gonna trigger, right? So when we're talking about evolution, it's gonna be certain factors that trigger selection. You know what I mean? Like you guys all learned biology, right? So you guys talk about this in biology, right? Natural selection, right? You didn't take biology?
This year.
Why do you learn biology so late? What's natural selection?
It's the process of how species evolve.
Yes, it's a process by which they evolve, but what does that mean?
It means that that based on the environment in which they live in, they adapt to that environment slowly over time. So like,
Is that what natural selection
no,
means?
I'm getting to that point. So then, as a result, um, there's going to be possibilities of certain animals in their species that have genetic mutations. So what happens is that they adapt by like, it's kind of like wiping out some, well, not like literally like wiping out, but eventually those animals that don't have that specific mutation for adapting to that environment, they will eventually die out, and only those with the mutation will be able to survive.
Okay, that was pretty long, but you're correct. Okay, so mutations happen everywhere, right? Mutations. So I mean, let's talk about grasshoppers, for example. Why are grasshoppers green? Right? So why are all grasshoppers green? Well, first of all, I mean, were they always green? Chances are they're not, right? Like there were other color grasshoppers too, but they all died. They couldn't reproduce. Why? Because they're more conspicuous, right? But green grasshoppers are the only ones that survived, right? That's basically what you were talking about, right? So if you have a certain mutation for color, right? It's going to, like certain mutations are going to higher your chance of survival. Like you're gonna have a better chance surviving and thus reproducing, right? That's natural selection. So inevitably, when we talk about evolution, we talk about natural selection. But I'm not saying it's always going to be like a primary idea in the passage, but you should know that. You should know that there's going to be some kind of change over time. We're going to be talking about some kind of change over time and or natural selection. And or we're going to be talking about some differences within the species. Right? So I mean these are the common things that we talk about when we talk about evolution, right? So these are the things that you could expect. Okay, so let's talk about this. Evolution in a toxic world, how life responds to chemical threats. Okay, so there's going to be chemical threats. I don't know what these are, but we're going to have responses to that, right? Okay, so let's take a look. And then it gives us some background information, okay? So these are definitely important, okay? When a science passage gives you background information, it means that you need to know this, and this is going to come into play in the passage. And you can't understand the passage without knowing this. You're going to have a really difficult time. That's why they're just giving you this right off the bat, because they felt like you need to know this in order to understand the passage. So this is extremely important. Okay, so UVB radiation. So I don't know what UVB radiation is, right? For our purposes, I don't know what it is. Like you might have some prior knowledge to it, but I'm saying don't use your prior knowledge, right? Always define scientific terms. So what does UVB radiation do? It can damage DNA. Okay, so I'm just gonna say UR, right? So what does UR do? This damages DNA, okay? This is our definition of UVB radiation and nothing else, right? What about DNA photolysis? Okay, so DNA photolysis is an enzyme that can repair DNA damage. Okay, so I'll say DP. Okay, DNA photolysis. What does this do? This repairs DNA. Okay, so pretty simple. So we have something that damages DNA and something that repairs DNA. So two things that are going to be pretty opposite to each other, and that's going to come into play in our passage. So let's take a look here. So there's a scientist called AB. So this is what you want to do. Remember this, right? So when you see a scientist, you should box that guy. This is the first time that he shows up. An ecologist at the University of Oregon, okay, I don't care what college he's from, has studied frogs for decades. Okay, so now so this is our subject matter, probably, right? So probably I mean, in the title, it said how life responds to chemical threats, but probably we're going to be talking about frogs in particular, right? So frogs, and for the past 10 years, he has turned his attention to the role of UV radiation in population declines. Okay, so now you should tie this background knowledge in, right? So we said UVB radiation, that's going to damage DNA, and thus, I guess this idea, population decline, right? So this is his subject matter, right? He's studying, hey, UV radiation that leads to population decline. So that's what he's studying. Like many ectotherms, okay, so ectotherms, and then we have the definition for ectotherms, right? Animals formerly known as cold-blooded, right? So like lizards and stuff. Lizards and fish and that kind of thing, right? So ectotherms, some frog species lay their eggs in sunlit ponds or puddles. So I don't know what the significance of this is. Sunlit ponds or puddles, I don't know, right? So probably this, I mean, I'm guessing that this has something to do with UVB radiation because sunlit, but I don't know how exactly that comes into play just yet, okay? Well, anyway, expressly relying on the sun's energy to speed along egg hatching, larval development, and metamorphosis before their ephemeral pond dries. Okay, so the key word here is relying, right? So they rely on the sun's energy, right? So there are certain frogs that rely on sun's energy. That's why he mentioned the sunlit ponds and puddles and whatnot, right? And then it says, much like photosynthesis or vitamin D production, it's a trade-off. Okay, so what do you mean it's a trade-off? So I guess he explains the trade-off here, right? So trade-off means what? You lose something, you gain something, right? Or potentially you lose something, potentially you gain something. In the frog's case, faster development in the higher risk environment. Oh, okay, right? So they get this, but they have this potential risk, right? So they rely on the sun's energy, but the thing that you need to know is it's high risk, high return. So what am I doing so far? I'm just defining stuff, right? Since we're reading background information, right? I don't know what the study's gonna be about. I don't know what's about to be explained. I have no idea what's gonna happen in this passage. I have no sense of expectation. I know, the only thing I know is they're gonna eventually end up talking about these two things, but I don't know in what sense just yet. And if you don't have that expectation, you need to define everything. You need to slow down and you need to take in all the information, okay? But you shouldn't be turned off by, like all the big vocabulary and stuff. Because you're just defining stuff as you go on, right? Okay, so this is what we have so far. So frogs rely on the sun's energy, and this is a high risk and high return environment. And then it says, of course, like most creatures living under the sun, amphibians are well defended. Okay, so they're well defended against UVB radiation. Okay, so if you live under the sun, you are well defended, usually. In addition to behavior changes like burrowing in mud, so these are behavioral changes, blah, 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 or under the production of natural sunscreen and amphibian. So in addition to all of these, in addition to behavioral changes like these and blah, 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 they have redundant systems for DNA repair, including DP. So we finally mentioned this, right? So they have a lot of defensive mechanisms. This is my word, by the way, right? I'm just rephrasing. They have a lot of defensive mechanisms, and these defensive mechanisms are usually behavioral, or it's the production of sunscreens, right? So they make sunscreens and these kinds of things. But not only that, they also have DP, right? This is where we start, right? We haven't even gotten started yet. We didn't even start. We don't even know what this passage is going to be about. This is just explaining like frogs and stuff, right? Okay, so let's go to the next paragraph. Interested in the level of protection offered by DP. Okay, so this is what they wanted to find out. So this is important now, right? So this is blah, 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 blah. So LB. So we have our first scientist, but what this is what you need to account for. What was LB's question, right? So LB had some motivation, right? LB had a certain reason why she wanted to conduct this study. So what was that? Level of protection afforded by DP. So how much protection does it offer, right? So that's how much protection does DP offer? And what else? And the potential impacts of increased UVB exposure. Okay, so impact of UVB. So this is the harmful element, right? DP is the repairing element, right? So this was her question, right? This was her motivation, okay? She compared the life history habits of several amphibian species. What is this? This is the process, right? The process is compared the life history habits of several amphibian species with DNA photolysis activity in their eggs. Okay, so she just compared something, right? Their study reveals strong, okay, so now we jumped right to the result, right? I don't really care about the process, how she conducted the study, but I do care about the results, right? So what were her results? That's what I want to find out, right? So what was the results? Strong positive correlations. That's easy, right? Correlations are always easy, right? Something happens, something also happens, right? They happen together, they occur together, right? I don't know if it's a cause and effect, right? Sometimes if a correlation goes over like 90%, then you can say it's a cause and effect, probably, right? But I don't know yet. UVB resistant frog species and increased photolysis activity. Okay. Can you not do that? I'm not. Why am I writing UVB? Can you stop doing that? UVB resistant. I'm just gonna say DP because this is what we're talking about, right? Photolysis. This is the repairing element, right? So UVB resistant frog species, they produce a lot of DP, right? That's what they got, right? In comparison to species whose eggs tend to be protected from direct sunlight. Okay, so there are other species, right? So there's a point of comparison here. What's the point of comparison? There are species that avoid sunlight. So compared to these, they had a correlation here, right? In other words, okay, so in other words, I mean, that's always good, right? They're always going to put it in more simpler terms for us to understand. In other words, frog species that lay their eggs in sun-drenched environments. So what does it mean sun-drenched? Does that mean there's a lot of sun or no? A lot of sun are better able to repair DNA damage caused by UVB. Right, I mean, because that's what this is, right? This is the repairing thing, right? So it's the same thing, right? They're just saying the same thing. And after that, it says, not only that, but subsequent field studies. Okay, so subsequent field studies, I want to box this also. Subsequent field species confirm the detrimental effects of naturally occurring levels of UVB to developing eggs of some frog species, while, okay, so detrimental effects of UVB. So that's what they found out. Oh, these are detrimental. While those with the highest concentration of photolias, the Pacific tree frogs. Okay, so this is I think pretty significant. Why? Because when it comes to concentration of photolias, there's nothing that beats Pacific tree frogs, right? These are the ones that have the most photolias, right? These ones were more resistant. Okay, so subsequent field studies. Oh, SFS, right? Subsequent field studies, they confirmed detrimental effects of UVB, but they also did something else, right? Pacific tree frogs, they were, so they had a lot of DP, and these were more resistant. Okay, so it says beyond killing embryos, right B and B, UVB exposure may also cause sublethal and potential subtle effects. So when I'm reading this, what I want to think is, okay, so this is just elaborating on the detrimental effects mentioned before. Do you see this? So I see this detrimental effect here, right? So it's mentioned here. And starting from this sentence, it's elaborating on this detrimental effect. You see this? Detrimental effect, and starting from here, it's elaborating on that, right? So I don't really care about this. Their findings raise an intriguing question. Okay, intriguing question. That should. I mean, this is huge. If a passage tells you something is intriguing, or something is surprising, or something is interesting, that should be interesting to you too, even though it's not. I mean, that's what we need to focus on. Okay, so what's the intriguing question? Are less resistant species more susceptible to DNA damage? Okay, so that's the question that we have. If we have less resistance, does that mean we're more susceptible? This was the question, right? The question was answered in part. Okay, so I guess, so now when you're reading, what you should be reading in terms of answering this question, right? So low resistance, does that mean they're susceptible? That's what you should be trying to answer here when you're reading. Okay, so it was answered in part by researchers working with the blah 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 blah. Frog population, so French Alps, right? Frog populations adapted to life at higher altitudes, and therefore, okay, so higher altitudes, higher UVB exposure. So I guess these two things go hand in hand, right? Showed less DNA damage. So this is how ideally you should annotate this. These three things go along together, right? Then did their lower altitude brethren. Okay, so lower altitude when exposed to UVB intensities typical of high altitude. Okay, right, so higher altitude versus lower altitude. Lower altitude is going to be lower UVB, and then I guess they got more damage. Right? So this is the point of comparison, right? So when you're reading this, you should be carefully laying out all the information, because passages like these, very information heavy, they could really potentially, I mean, you don't necessarily need to remember everything. I'm not saying you need to memorize this as you go along, but when you refer back to the passage, you should specifically be able to pinpoint information pretty quickly. So focus on annotating it neatly, okay? That's what's important, okay? When you're doing these kinds of passages. When exposure, blah, 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 blah. Identifying the genetic mechanism of this adoption will require further study. Okay, so these kinds of things I like to see, right? Will require further study. So this is, what they got to, okay? Well, anyway, so let's go to the next part. It says, although DNA photolysis concentrations were not measured, the authors report an interesting twist that suggests increased photolysis activity in high altitude tadpoles. Interested in other ways, okay, so I just want to keep reading this. Interested in other ways frogs might experience DNA damage, they studied the effects of BAP. What in the world is this? Okay, so now we have a completely new element here, right? So why did they study BAP? Because they wanted to find out how they might experience DNA damage. So that's why they use this, right? Cigarette smoke, coal tar, oil, and myriad other combustion products. So this is something that's very harmful. So they just wanted to gain some insight in DNA damage. So I guess they studied this. And then it says BAP is intoxicant and blah, 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 causing a kink just like UVB. So it's kind of like UVB in a sense that it causes some damage. And this is the definition of BAP. And you should note it like this, because when it asks for a definition, you want to come back to this part. A specialty of DNA photolysis is kinky DNA. It turns out that high altitude frogs had less, okay, so here's the result. High altitude frogs, less BAP damage, right? Okay, so high altitude, low BAP damage compared with their lowland cousins. Okay, so if it's low altitude, it's high BAP damage. So this is how you should get the information down, right? Added protection by DNA photolysis? Maybe. Okay, so this is how the question was answered in part, right? So in order to answer this question, they brought in some other measures, right? Because they couldn't study this properly. So they studied something called BAP, right? And they come to this conclusion. And then it says, until enzyme concentrations are confirmed, any added protection cannot yet be attributed to increased DNA photolysis. Okay, so this is a classic example of an incomplete conclusion, incomplete ending, right? So we're saying, hey, we don't know for sure yet, right? Okay, so in order to do this, we come to this conclusion, right? I'll just go a little bit over here. We brought in the BAP thing, and if the altitude was high, there was less BAP damage. The lower altitude ones, they had a higher BAP damage, right? And then based on this, they say did protection by DP, and they said maybe. Okay, so coming back to the passage. Okay, so when you're reading passages like these, when it's giving you a lot of information, you want to make some side notes like I did, like these kinds of side notes so that you could easily see all the information that you need on the side, okay? Instead of just circling it, I mean, these could potentially help you. Okay, so I mean, it takes I mean, if you thought this passage was hard, you just look over this passage over and over again until you get how you should organize information and that kind of thing. Like, you should just try and lay it out for yourself. If you try laying out the passage for yourself, you're practicing that muscle in you where you're better able to absorb information, because you should be in information absorbing mode when you're reading these types of passages. Okay, it started off talking with this guy, and then this guy, he was studying frogs, right? Studying frogs, and then blah 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 blah. We do this, we talk about all of this, and then we introduce the idea of DNA photolysis, which is which helps repairing DNA, right? So that's where we start, and then B and LB, right? B and LB did this study, right? B and co-author LB. I guess I left that out, right? So it's not necessarily just LB. It's B and LB, right? So they did this, and then the result that we got was this: positive correlation between UVB resistant frog species and high DP production compared to ones that are not exposed to sunlight, right? And then subsequent studies. Subsequent field studies confirmed the detrimental effects of UVB, and then they talk about this also. So the Pacific tree frogs, these are the ones that are highest in DP production. They are more resistant, right? So DP does indeed make you resistant, kind of thing. And then, I mean, but if it's low resistance, are they susceptible? And they didn't completely answer this question, but in order to answer this question, they brought in that idea of high altitude and low altitude frogs, and they studied them. And then they also needed to bring this idea in, right, BAP, because they couldn't directly measure that or whatever. So they bring in this carcinogen or whatever, and they got this result. And then we don't have a definitive answer, right? But it's a maybe, right? Okay, so let's go to the questions. Okay, so 22. Based on the passage, which situation is most similar to that described in lines 10 to 13? Okay, so let's take a look at 10 to 13. What's 10 to 13? Okay, so it's this part, right? It's a trade-off, and it says, in the frog's case, faster development in a higher risk environment. So this is what we talked about, right? High risk, high return, right? So you're going to be exposed to UVB radiation and that kind of thing, but also, well, higher risk. Yeah, so I mean, because of UVB radiation, you're going to get damage and stuff, but also you're going to grow faster, right? So high risk, high return environment. So that's how I'm going to solve 22. High risk, high return. High risk, high return. Okay, so male elk that expends considerable energy to grow large antlers. Okay, well, I don't understand. I don't understand how this is high risk and high energy. What's the high risk? I mean, they use a lot of energy, but where's the risk? I don't necessarily get it. What about B? A deer that forages. What does forage mean? This is this is used pretty often. Forage. Yeah, looking for food in an area with plentiful resources. Okay, so that's high reward. In close proximity to predators, this is high risk, right? So risk, reward, they're both high. So B is the right answer here, right? Okay, so that's easy. Let's take a look at 23. The passage indicates that burrowing in mud may benefit some amphibians by... Okay, so this is, I mean, I remember. So when you can't answer this question directly, what you should do is, okay, I'm just going to physically look for this. Okay. So burrowing in mud. Where is this? I just want to find it, like locate it. Okay. Do I have a line reference question? No, I don't. Then now you really just need to find it. So where is burrowing in mud? Can you guys find that for me?
Line 15 to
Okay, so if we take a look at line 15, I see here, in addition to behavioral changes like burrowing in mud and blah, 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 okay? Well, think about this though. This sentence is a detailed sentence to the sentence before this, right? This sentence was saying, like most creatures, amphibians are well defended. And in order to elaborate on this well-defended idea, they use these examples, right? Well-defended, and why are they well-defended? Because they have some behavioral mechanisms like burrowing in mud or laying eggs in logs or that kind of thing. They have natural sunscreen and they have DNA repair, right? So these are all like their defense, all of their defense mechanisms, right? So that's how I'm going to solve this question. So, but is that actually repairing? So who chose B here? Did anybody choose B? Okay. So now this is why you need to be careful, right? In addition to A, amphibians have systems for repair. Do you see this? In addition to behavioral changes, they have repair systems. So obviously these two things are not the same thing. Do you understand? Yeah. So they burrow in mud or lay eggs in logs. Okay, so now you need to kind of blah, blah, blah. Now you're thinking about these, right? So so burrowing in mud is in contrast with this also, right? Eggs in sunlit environment, right? So these are ones that are exposed to the sun, and I guess these ones are not exposed to the sun. That's how you should be thinking about this, right? And natural sunscreen. But anyway, you should be thinking about it in terms of a defense mechanism, but also that's something that's not repairing, because it says in addition to that, they have repair systems. So not this. Delaying egg hatch, well, no, it's not necessarily. We didn't ever talk about timing or anything. This passage is all about UVB radiation and that kind of thing, right? So, well, and of course, this is not the same idea. I mean, this is a separate idea also. Natural sunscreen is also it's also an additional idea. Do you know what I mean? So burrowing in mud, laying in eggs, and the production of natural sunscreen. So these things are not the same thing, right? So I guess it's C, limiting their exposure to sunlight, as opposed to being in sunlit areas, right? Okay, 24. Based on the passage, it can most reasonably be inferred from the research conducted in the French Alps that, okay, so, well, what should I do here? Well, you should, well, first of all, you should look for the French Alps, right? And do I have a line reference question here? Yeah. So, where can I find French Alps? Okay.
47, 40.
Okay, so here we go. So starting from here, right? So I'm not going to look before this, right? Actually, let me take a look at the line reference. Yeah, so I can eliminate 47 to 49, right? Because this paragraph isn't really saying anything. It's just saying the question was answered by researchers who are doing this. This is just a process sentence, right? So I don't really care about this, right? So let's go to the next sentence. Frog populations adapted to life at higher altitudes and therefore naturally blah 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 showed less DNA damage. So this was, so answer choice B is that bit, right? Answer choice B is starting from here, which is talking about high altitudes is high UVB exposures and then less DNA damage, right? So B is talking about this idea, right? What's answer choice C? 54. Identifying the genetic mechanism, blah, 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 will require, will require further study. Okay, will require further study. What about D? 57 to 60. Okay, so 57. Although DNA blah 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 were not measured, the authors report an interesting twist that suggests photolysis activity in high altitude tadpoles. Okay, so high altitude, high photolysis. Okay, so this is what we have, right? This is what we have. The answer could be anything because it's pretty broad, right? So, oh, actually, no. No, sorry, yeah. I mean, I was looking at the wrong question. Okay, so what can we say based on this? So we have all our options here. So this is how you should be looking at it. Because, I mean, these should be your notes right next to the line reference. Okay, this is how you should be looking at the question because these could potentially be anything, right? The answer is too general, right? Do you know what I mean? So I have all of these here, and now let's go. Let's take a look. Living at higher altitudes affects larval growth. Why in the world are we talking about larval growth? This is completely irrelevant. I mean, I read all of these answer choices and I mean, this is just an irrelevant idea. What about B? High levels of UV, okay, so I think we're getting somewhere, right? High UVB exposure cause lethal, what? No, it doesn't cause lethal effects, right? I mean, they survived, they obviously lived there. Does that mean they're gonna die? No. C, DNA photolysis concentrations are naturally higher in the species of frogs that were studied. Okay, so just because we study, okay, so the species that we studied, they just have naturally higher photolysis? Well, it's not about just naturally occurring photolysis. It has to do with altitudes and stuff like that. I don't understand. What about D? Tolerance to UVB exposure can vary within a species. Yeah, they do vary. Why? I mean, according to altitude, they vary, right? That's what the whole thing was about. So this one is going to be our answer. And it's not necessarily going to be D here because D, it was talking about the tadpoles and, yeah, I mean, and not that, but like, it doesn't, what was that? It's talking about tolerance, okay? So it's talking about tolerance. So we need that word in it, okay? So where are we gonna find tolerance? Here, less DNA damage in 52. Okay, so that's how you should solve it. Okay, so don't get confused with the line reference. Okay, so when it comes to line reference questions, the answer always needs to physically be in the line reference itself. Okay. Did you get this wrong? Okay. Well, 61. Okay, so this is just gonna go. This is just gonna be undergo, right? Experience. They undergo whatever. 27. Okay, so this one should be interesting. So it can reasonably. This one was pretty difficult, no? Was it? Okay, so let's try this one, okay? So this is the fun part. Can reasonably be inferred from the passage. Okay, so it's reasonably be inferred, so we have a little bit of leeway that if further research demonstrated that, okay, so it's not saying that this happened. We're talking about this hypothetically, right? If something is the case, well, if what is the case? DNA photolysis protected the high altitude frogs from BAP-induced DNA damage. Okay, so if it is indeed DP that protected them from BAP, then the Pacific tree frog should let's talk about this, okay? DP protected the high, okay, so this is true, right? DP protected the high altitude frogs from BAP damage. We're assuming that that's true. What's the one fact that we can know about Pacific tree frogs? You should go back, look for Pacific tree frogs.
We have high DP and thermal resistance.
What?
Thermal resistance.
No.
The higher concentration of photo, I mean, P.
DP?
Yeah.
Yeah. There was that comparison associated with Pacific tree frogs. Do you remember that? Where was that?
Lines 35, 40.
Okay, so if you look at 3540, okay, Pacific tree frogs were most. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. It does also say they are most resistant. I guess. Yeah, so you were right also. So they have highest concentration of photolysis and they were also most resistant here. So, but what's our question then? Our question is asking us, hey, what happens if the high altitude ones, it was actually, yeah, it was because of DP that the BAP damage was lowered or that kind of thing, right? So what can we say? I mean, at least they're going to have a similar ability to cope with the BAP pollution, right? Because they're the ones with the most DP production. That's the least you can do. I mean, they're going to have a similar ability, if not more, right? Because these are the most, these are the ones with the most DP. Do you know what I mean? So, I mean, I'm leaning towards this one, right? Then, what should we do? Then we have this in our answer choice. Cope with BAP pollution, okay? And then we have BAP damage here. So these all need to be in the line reference, okay? So the BAP pollution, coping with BAP pollution plus BAP induced damage. So that's what I need in the answer choice. And if we're going to be talking about BAP, I better look at the last part. I'm not going to start looking from A. Do you know what I mean? Because I know for a fact that BAP shows up in the last part of the passage, right? So where's D? 66. So let's take a look at 66. Okay, so activated BAP binds with DNA causing, okay, so this is talking about the damage, right? It turns out that high altitude frogs had less BAP induced DNA damage. There we go, we have it. So it's D, right? Do you guys understand this? Good? You get it? Okay. Okay, 29. So I'm not going to do this one. This one is just C, right? Verified. Okay, supported by data in figure 1. Okay, so this one should be easy. How do you solve this question? One thing that you should be extremely careful about is you can't make any value judgments, right? You can't say something is like the best thing that happened or whatever. And the only thing, I didn't take a look at figure 1 yet, but if you take a look at figure 1, it's probably going to be all numbers. The only thing that you can say is something regarding numbers, right? And you can't say anything regarding the cause of something. You can't really say anything about why it happened. You can't do that, okay? So let's take a look. Only those amphibian species with photolysous activity less than or equal to 0.7 lay their eggs where there is no exposure. So what do I need to find? So if it's 0.7 or less, I need to see no exposure to sunlight. So this is what I need to look for. Okay, so if I take a look at the figure, I take a look at less than 0.7. So less than 0.7, I see it here, I see it here, I see it here. Equal or less than. So, and then it says unexposed, unexposed, unexposed. Okay, so I can't see unexposed anywhere else. Yeah, there we go. So it's A, right? Which species lays its eggs in location with the greatest okay, so I'm not going to bother doing this one. This one should be extremely easy. You should not get this wrong, right? Just find the one with the highest exposure to sunlight. Well, was that figure 1? This is one that says high exposure, right? So I guess it's that. I guess it's C. I don't even know why they're asking this question. Okay. Which data from figure 2? Okay. Was this one hard or no?
Well, I wouldn't say hard, and I wouldn't say easy either.
Okay, this one, you need to take a look at the passage also and figure 2, right? So what does it ask you? It's talking about figure 2 and something that's going to be inconsistent with the passage, right? About the frog populations in the French Alps, okay? So if you take a look at passage 2 first, what is it talking about? So this is altitude. So this is altitude, and we have a UVB exposure, and this is DNA damage. Okay, so according to the passage, what should happen? If you're high altitude, you should have less damage. That's what should happen, right? So that's my expectation. So the damage should be lower. But I see some points that are inconsistent here, right? So say, for example, 294 and 410. 410 is higher, so this should have less damage, but it's not the case. So I need to find a point that's inconsistent with that, right? So I need to point that out, which would be C here, right? So 800 above sea level, they had more damage, right? So more damage than 294. Yeah, according to the passage, this one should be lower than 294, right? But that didn't happen. Okay, so this passage, so if you have any takeaway points from this, it should be this. Okay, so the line reference questions on this passage, it's not that easy, okay? It's not that easy, like the paired questions. But what you should be doing, the takeaway point should be this. Okay, so this one is asking about the French Alps, and it was a general question, right? So what you should be doing is go to the line reference first and look for the part that has the French Alps. And what you're going to be doing is you're going to make notes right next to it, right? you're going to make okay, so this one was talking about the high altitude or whatever. This one was talking about the further research or whatever. So make small notes next to it. And then using that, you're just choosing one that can coincide with this, right? That's how you should be solving it, okay? And for this one, for example, so this one, what you should have been able to do was, it's asking you about PTFs, right? It's asking you about PTFs, so what you should be thinking is, okay, what's one thing that I should remember about PTFs? And that was pretty obvious because there was a comparison in the passage regarding PTFs. They were the highest in DP and they were the highest in resistance, right? So using that, you can get to A easily, right? And after you get to A, you should look at this. It has ability to cope with BAP pollution, and I also have BAP-induced DNA damage, and that needs to be in the line reference. Physically, I need to find that in the line reference. So I went from D here, because that's where I see the BAP damage. Do you know what I mean? Okay, so that's how you should do line reference questions, okay? Physically locating them. That's extremely important, or else you're gonna be very inconsistent on them if you start thinking about it, okay? Okay, any questions on this passage or in general so far? Gosh. Okay, can you guys hold on a second? Let me go check something real quick. So you guys should, do you guys have notebooks at home? Yeah. Empty notebooks? Yeah. Like new notebooks? Yep. Not new notebooks? Okay, buy one. If you don't have a notebook, buy one. Not a notebook computer, I'm saying notes. And write all of the things that you have on there, okay? All the notes. And I'm not gonna tell you how much, but remember the spoon-fed book, right? So I don't know how much time you guys have on your hands. So I mean, I don't wanna force you guys to do too much, but you're gonna spoon-fed reading workbook, right? So you're gonna start looking at the passages again, but this time what you're gonna be doing is you're going to be outlining the passages, okay? So what do I mean outlining the passages? I mean, this is what I did. This is what I did with the third passage today, right? So basically you should be doing the same thing that I do, okay? So start outlining them, and I I mean, I want you guys to try at least 5 passages. Okay? That's my recommendation, but I mean, I can't force you to do it. But like, you have to trust me that it really is helpful at this point, okay? That's what's going to be like your unconscious database that you can refer back to when you're confronting new passages, okay? And also, tomorrow we're gonna go over the rest of the test, and we're gonna do some new passages tomorrow, okay? But that is not gonna be homework. So homework is exclusively outlining, but you should take this pretty seriously, okay? Because it works, trust me. Like when you're solving new passages, okay? Okay. If you guys don't have any questions, I'll see you guys tomorrow.
Oh, we're actually done.
Huh?
We're actually done.
What?
We're done.
Yeah.
Oh,
Why?
oh, I thought it was longer.
Huh?
I thought it was until 6.
It's until 6 if we start at, because that's considering that we start at 2:30. If you take a look at the schedule.
Oh, oh.
But if we started at 2:30, we would have ended at 6. But you know, since there's no reason to start at 2:30, we started at 1. Bye.